Big thanks to Riverside.fm for sponsoring this video. I'm always excited for motion graphics inspiration, and at the end of the Godzilla -1 trailer, oh baby, this is so cool. So let's make something like this in Fusion. So we have a few different elements here. We have our big Godzilla G, which kind of gets painted on, and then we have the brush stroke for the Godzilla and the brush stroke for -1. And then we have this quick brush stroke right here that turns the letters red. We have this kind of foggy lighting in the background. We have some particles and some dust. This is a really cool graphic, and we're going to use a lot of different super pro things in Fusion. Let's do it. So here we are in the Fusion page. I'm going to go up to the media pool, right click and say new Fusion composition. And we'll make this, I don't know, like 7 seconds. Something like that, and hit create and double click on that comp to open it up here in our Fusion page. I'm gonna go up to workspace and select show page navigation to get rid of our bottom bar there, just to give us a little bit of screen space, and we'll move our media out over here. Most of the time when we're building graphics, I like to start with a background. We'll just drag this background in, and now we have a black screen, yay! I have a couple PNGs here, and these together make up our logo. I can select all of these and just drag them in and hit 1 on the keyboard. And this I put together in Affinity Designer, which is a great vector program, by the way. And so we have our logo here, and we have this broken up into 3 parts. We have monster, which I'm gonna hit F2 and rename each of these monster and lizard and the G logo. And I'll probably just select both of these merges and get rid of them here. And these are coming in as black, which is totally fine because we're just gonna use these as masks. Some of you might know I recently started a podcast with none other than Mr. Alex Tech. And because I'm in the United States and he's in the UK, we have to do the whole thing remotely. And recording somebody who isn't in the room with you these days can honestly still be a little bit problematic. I've tried so many different ways to do this, from screen recording video calls to having the other person record on their end and then send me files. And it was honestly just pure misery until I started using Riverside FM. Riverside is a website that gives you an online studio, and you can record your video call. It records on each person's machine locally and then uploads it. That means if they have spotty Wi-Fi, that won't show up in the recording. After your chat, you can log into your studio and access your pristine, perfect recordings and edit them together right there in the studio, and even publish directly to a variety of different outlets. Using Riverside makes it so easy to make this podcast. Honestly, I don't think we could do it without Riverside. You can try Riverside now with the link in the description and use the code KC20 to get 20% off. Riverside FM, check them out. Now, what are we going to mask? Well, if we look at our reference, we have this very grungy background here. So we're going to use some grunge. This is just a JPEG of some grungy wall. Let's just merge this grunge over our background like this. Very nice. And I'm going to hit Shift Spacebar and type XF for transform, and then scale this down to where we can see most of it. Maybe even push this down a little bit so it's going to be mostly the light part on screen. I like that. And just because this is a super high res image, I'm just going to go ahead and right click and save an image somewhere really pro like my desktop, and we'll just call this grunge image.png. Then I'll just grab that image and drop it back in. I can just hold Shift and drag this up and then just put this back over, okay? We just have a little bit more optimized image. You don't have to do that, but we're gonna use this image a lot, so might as well make it easy. Call this grunge. And now to cut this grunge out based on these layers, we can just put the layer under the merge here and connect that to the mask input. And this works great if everything's the same size. So our grunge is 1920 by 1080. Our layers here are 1920 by 1080. Our comp is 1920 by 1080. If everything's the same size, oh, it works so wonderfully. If it's not, you have to do some cropping and resizing and stuff, and it's not that big of a deal, but you know, it's more work. So that's cool. I like that. Let's actually take the grunge and merge it over again. And we'll just put lizard into this one. Again, take the output, merge it over the output of this merge 2, and then plug monster into here. So now we have the grunge going into 3 different layers basically, and each one is being masked by a different layer here. Now we could have put these together and then did the mask, but this is going to give us a little bit more control on how these animate on and that kind of thing. So this grunge is a little bit warmer. And so let's go ahead and add something like a color corrector here. Let's just push that a little bit warmer. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that looks nice. So here's where we were and here's where we are now. Now, the way that this animates on, we have our G kind of being painted on, and then we have kind of this brush stroke that goes across that paints on Godzilla and paints on -1. So we want to do sort of a similar thing here. And let's start with just animating this lizard on. I'm just going to grab a regular rectangle mask, drag that down under lizard and connect that here. And now what we could do is grab this mask and and just kind of wipe it like that. And so let's just start with that kind of thing. Let's maybe move forward, I don't know, 20 frames or so. We'll have this end up right about there, and we'll keyframe the center and then go back to frame 0, and we'll just push this quite a bit off the side like this. So now this just goes like that. So now we have that wiping on, but it obviously doesn't look great. It's obviously just a linear wipe. So to make that a little nicer, let's open up this mask. I'm just hitting 2 on the keyboard to open this up. In fact, let's keep this in our second viewer, and we'll open our first viewer here. We can take a look at our mask. If we want this to look like a brush stroke is painting this on, like if we look here, there's kind of this jagged mask. We can make this all jaggedy with some displacement. So if I type DISP, go down, I want this displace node right here. And by default, it's not going to do anything, but I'm going to make sure this is in our first viewer by hitting 1 on the keyboard. It's not really doing a whole lot. The reason for that is because we have this rectangle attached in the mask input, and it needs to be in the yellow input. So now that's just coming in as an image, and we need to tell this displace what to do. So we can grab something like the fast noise and plug that into the green right here. And what we're gonna do is use this fast noise to tell that displacement how to mess with the image. We're gonna prepare our fast noise a little bit. I'll push up the scale like this, maybe push up the detail a little bit, something like that, 1 on the keyboard. And now if we switch this from radial to XY, I can start pushing up this X refraction, and now it kind of eats that away. And you see what's going on? This really gives us a cool effect. And I'm gonna push this offset back a little bit. That makes it so the edge doesn't move so much. It just kind of stays where it's at. So that works really well. I think I'll also take this fast noise and unlock X and Y, and I can push the X scale back just to make this a little bit longer like this. And so now as this paints on, we're getting that nice kind of painty brush stroke looking mask instead of the flat, just straight mask like that. So that really, really helps. Gosh, it's so easy to make that. All we did was just put that displace in there, drive it with that fast noise. I'm actually gonna grab this displace and maybe push the Y refraction up a little bit too, just to roughen this top side. Whereas normally it would just be straight. We're just gonna take this offset down and then push up that refraction a little bit too, just in case we ever see that edge that it looks a little more natural. Great. So now we have that being painted on like that. Oh, looks so good. All right, this is great. I think actually what I'll do with this rectangle and this displace and everything, we're probably not gonna mess with this a whole lot. So I'm just gonna hit Control G to group this, and let's rename this. We'll call this paint on, okay? And now we can use the same node to drive our monster as well. Those both get painted on at the same time. But what's gonna be a little easier actually is just to duplicate this. I'll just hit Control C, double click, and hit Control V, and then connect this here, and we'll call this paint on 2. And now we can offset the animation of this by going up to keyframes. And I have an option here under these 3 dots checked, show only selected tools, so we don't get overwhelmed by stuff, but I can select both this paint on and paint on 2, and I can see my keyframes, and I can just grab one of these and push it back. So I'll take paint on 2 and just push it back a few frames for now, something like that. Let's play this back and see. Lizard, monster. Yes. See what we're doing? You see what we're doing. Okay, great. We're actually gonna start these probably later, so maybe 20 and 42 or something. I don't know. We can always mess with this afterwards. Lizard monster. I know there's a lot here, and if you're new to Fusion, you're probably like, oh my gosh, my brain's about to explode. Well, I have a lot of videos on Fusion, so if you're just getting started, make sure to check out some of my more basic stuff. But a great starting point is the 9 nodes you need to make almost anything in Fusion. That is a free workshop. Sign up for that, and I'll show you kind of the minimum stuff that you need to make like so much stuff in Fusion. I mean, there's hundreds of nodes, but you really only need like 9 or 10 of them to make a lot of really neat stuff, including a lot of the stuff that we're going to do here. So make sure to check that out. There's also a link in the description. Now let's do a similar thing for this G, but we're going to draw a special mask for that. Let's just take a polygon mask, drag that down under our G and connect it. And I'm going to turn it off so that we can see the G. Now we can draw directly on our screen, and I'm just going to kind of draw an arc sort of around the outside of this and then bring it up towards the middle like this, like I'm just drawing a G with a marker. Okay. The reason for that is because when I turn this mask back on and I uncheck solid and I push up border width, if I hit 1 on the keyboard, we can see the mask that we're making. We're making a stroke that's in the shape of this G. And as I push up this border width, we can reveal more of this arrow and everything. And once that's about the right width, I can move this around and make sure we get the right shape. I think I'll push this border width up even more. All of that G. And I'm just going to move these out so that I'm not interfering with any other part of the G. I'm just animating what I need to on this G like that. Because now now if I take this length slider and I pull this back, what happens? We can draw this G along those lines. Isn't that sweet? One thing I'll do is change the cap here. Let's change this to this right here. So now as this G goes in, it looks like it's being painted on. We just gotta kind of move this around to where it doesn't really paint on itself too early. Something like that looks pretty good. It doesn't really need to be that exact because it's gonna be pretty quick and we're gonna add some distortion to it. But yeah, that's the basic idea. Something like that. We're gonna do our best. All right, now that we have a decent animation there, we're gonna do sort of a similar trick is we're going to distort this with a displacement node and we're gonna drive it with our fast noise. Of course, the way that we connect this is important. Let's take the polygon, put it in the yellow, take the fast noise, put it in the green. And this time we're gonna leave this as radial. We'll hit 1 to bring this up on our left viewer here, this displace. Take our scale up for our fast noise and some detail like this. And then in displace, we'll take the offset all the way down and the refraction up so that we have this kind of crumbly looking edge. And now, as we take this length, it looks a little bit more natural anyway. See? We can combine this with softening our mask just a touch. And now we get sort of a little bit of faux motion blur as we do this. So like that, which guess what? I just about guarantee that's exactly how they animated this logo. As that comes up, it's revealing and it's a little bit soft, definitely close enough for what we're doing. I'm also gonna right click here for shape animation and just remove poly 1 polyline. That's gonna get rid of any keyframes on here. We're gonna get a little better playback that way. And now we're gonna go to frame, I don't know, 25 or so, keyframe our length and go to frame 0 and take our length all the way down. Guess what? Swoosh, baby, baby, this is looking so good. So good. So now we have a lot of our work done. Yes, sick. So what else we need here? All right, yeah, we have the paint strokes here that paint behind the letters and the letters turn red. So we need some kind of paint stroke here and I'll go into my media pool and I have an asset. I take this, bring this in, hit 1 on the keyboard. I have a little painted stroke. And you know what I might do? I might just put that same kind of displacement on here. I'll just Control C, Control V. You can always mess with an element that you bring in. You don't have to leave it just like it is. So we can play with this a little bit just to add a little bit of roughness so it doesn't look quite so just generated, because I just kind of painted this real quick in Affinity Photo. So yeah, now we have that. And again, I'll just select this and hit Control G and we'll just call this brush. Now I don't normally group things a whole lot because it's really annoying when you double click on them and it just opens up like this. I usually only group something if I'm just probably never gonna mess with it again. If it's just gonna be basically like its own image, I can do that. Same thing with the paint on. I'm never really gonna open those again, most likely. So that's why I'm grouping stuff, because it is kind of annoying to open stuff up and figure out what the heck's going on. But just so you know. So let's take this here and then mask that same grunge. I'll just again take the color corrector here and run that into another merge. That puts our entire grunge over our comp, and then we just mask it with the brush here. But this is in the wrong place. So if we hit Shift Spacebar and type XF for transform, we can have a transform and we'll just move this around. Over here where it says size and aspect, I'll uncheck that. So I have a separate X and Y size. And now I can put this exactly where I want it. And we're just gonna try and cover the word for now. Just kind of put that down right about where it's supposed to be. Great. We're gonna do a similar thing under the monster. In fact, I'll just grab another transform from our toolbar here, drag that down. I'll just push the same brush into transform 2, take the color corrector, make another layer that's just our grunge, and then plug that transform into the mask. Again, uncheck size and aspect. And this time I'll flip this like that, so it looks a little different. And then we'll put this over monster like that, maybe turn it a little bit. Yeah. And we're kind of just building this as we go, and we're going to animate things here in a minute, but we do want the red text over this. So I'm just going to grab our lizard and monster, copy and paste those. And same thing, take our grunge and merge it over itself. This, put that lizard into the mask, but this time I'm going to take something like our color corrector and put that in between our grunge and that merge. Because now if I take the gamma down maybe and push this a little bit red, maybe take the saturation down, push the lift down a little bit, kind of play with this, we can get that red text, because what we're doing is color correcting our grunge and then putting this lizard on as a mask for it. And that goes over everything, right? Let's do a similar thing for the monster. Let's rename this color corrector red CC. Take that red texture, merge it over everything, and plug monster into that. And now we have the red letters over it. It's really cool to be able to reuse this grunge in all these different places and just hook it up with the masks. This is a really unique way to do this with nodes that I really like. It's a lot better than duplicating this layer 50 times and having to apply different masks and stuff to it. It's really, really clear what's happening here. Very nice. So this is what it's going to end up looking like, but we need to animate on the brush strokes as well. So actually, Let's bring this brush down here, right click and say ungroup. We're going to ungroup that just for now. And we're going to mask this media in with a similar mask to our paint on mask, actually. In fact, I could probably just copy and paste this paint on mask like this, open up our rectangle here, make this a little bigger, and then adjust our keyframes and stuff here. So now we are painting that on like that. And now we're already having that animated, and that's already masking this stroke, which is already masking a bunch of other stuff. And I think I'll just go to the keyframes just to set us up a little easier. And just take these keyframes and move them to the beginning. Make sure everything is all lined up at the right place here. Okay. Then I'll take all of these and just group them. Control G. And we'll call this brush. Okay. Now this brush, check this out. This animated brush is already happening at the beginning, like that. So we can just take the keyframes, grab our brush, and move that back to wherever we want that to happen. So with the G, we have these on like that. Yeah, I'd say somewhere in there, something like that. And we can use these same masks to mask our monster and our lizard as it writes on. That's the thing. You do a little bit of work at the beginning, and now it's like already a thing. It's perfectly masking that for both of these. Yes, so cool. And the reason this animates the other way is because we already have this flipped in this transform because we flipped the actual image. So normally both of these would go the exact same way like that, but we have this flipped, so it tends to work out actually like that. So cool. Now I do want to have these not happen at the exact same time. So I could duplicate this, or I could even do something like time speed and just put this in the second transform right here and just delay it like 3 frames. And now it delays it a little bit, which is going to be a little bit easier to see if our keyframes go a little faster. It does come up pretty quick in the actual title. Also going to select this second keyframe and hit F on the keyboard to flatten that out a little bit. We can see that a little better in the spline panel here. Hold Alt and push this way. So this will go a little bit faster and then slow down towards the end. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so we have that delayed. And what's nice about the nodes is we have one animation and then it's automatically delayed 3 frames, and that happens automatically on 2 different layers. That's what's so cool, is you can kind of link up these little pieces of logic, almost like you're programming something.
It's hacking time.
While you're making your titles, rather than having to make multiple different layers and duplicate things and move them around like, you might be used to in other programs. This is cool. Ooh, one thing's happening though, where this time speed is being delayed 3 frames. So actually, instead of that, why don't we move this to the other one, hold Shift like this, and then just say -3. So now we won't have a problem like that. It'll just work. Now we will have a problem sort of towards the end, but we can trim that a little bit easier. Not that big a deal. We could also just easily copy and paste this brush like this and take this and push this forward a couple frames like that. And that's going to give us the same thing. It's just, it's a little less fancy. Okay, so we have our main animation. Oh baby, that looks sick. Now let's do some finishing touches. This has kind of this flickering light. We have this kind of grayish green background light. It's growing a little bit and there's these particles. Okay, so let's take a background. Let's merge this whole thing over a black background like this. Let's just go down here like this. So now it looks basically the same. We're gonna make sure that our first background here, we turn our alpha all the way down. That's gonna make sure that this is on transparent, but now we're putting it over black again because we wanna put some stuff behind it. Take this and just bring this down like this. Let's rename this black BG. Take another background. We'll call this gray green BG and merge this over the back. This, and let's pick kind of a grayish green. That pretty dark, but something like that. And we can quickly add a mask to it because what we want is this kind of light streaks thing. And there's 100 different ways to do it, but this is just so easy to just kind of do one of these type of things. Just literally draw that in and then soften it like this. And look at that. Oh, it's like cheating. It looks pretty good for the amount of effort we put in. You can select all of these points, just bring them down like that. There. Now we have a background. I can take this merge and bring the blend down a little bit just to blend that down. Now we have those little light streaks. It's maybe a little brighter at the top. Let's just make this blend up a little bit. We could do something like brightness and contrast and a little ellipse on that. We'll just soften this, push up the gain a little bit at the top. Make sure we make that ellipse really, really soft. Push up that gain. There we go. We have a little bit of light there. It's nice. And there's just a slight amount of flicker here. It's just flickering just a little bit. We can add that flicker by going to brightness and contrast and going over to settings and going to blend. Blend is like the strength of this effect. And if I take it down, we have that all the way down, right? I can take this blend And let's right click on blend and say modify with perturb. Go over to modifiers. And now if I play this back over to our tools here, we can see that this is messing with this blend a little bit. Take this blend down to like half and take this strength down to like 0.3 or something. And now if we play this back, we have that light kind of pulsating. Let's make it a little faster, push the wobble up a little bit. We have a little bit of flicker in that light. Cool, right? So that part is solved. Let's also add some particles. So to add particles, we need a couple different nodes. We need P emitter and P render. We need to connect those together. And let's take the P render and merge that over everything else. I'll just hit 2 on the keyboard to bring up the P render. We have all these little dots showing up. By default, they're in the middle and they're little tiny points. But if we select P emitter and go over to region, we can go to something like rectangle. We can push up the width and the height. And what that'll do is let us generate these points all over the screen. Now they're really hard to see because they're like one single pixel. Under style, if we go here where it says style and go to something like blob, and then under size controls, we can push up the size. Now we have little particles that we can see. Now we should make these a little bit more random, so we can push up the size variance. That'll make some of these big, some of them small. And now these all just kind of appear. We actually want to start with these on. So let's go over to controls, and here where it says number, let's push up a few numbers, like, I don't know, 20 or so. Then we can keyframe this number. Then at frame 0, we'll generate 18 particles. And then the next frame, frame 1, we'll turn that emitter off and we won't make any more particles. So we just go boom, we just set a bunch of particles there. Great, nothing's happening with them. Well, we could push up something like velocity and change the angle so that these are kind of moving up. We can have these kind of moving up like that. It's nice, right? But we can add a little bit more fanciness. If in between P emitter and P render, we hit shift spacebar and type PTUR. That'll bring up turbulence. This has a PT, so I call it turbulence because the P is silent, just like pterodon, right? Because you don't call it a pterodon. That'd be stupid. It's perturbulence. Okay. But look what this does. This makes these kind of move around randomly, which just adds some realistic goodness to it. These particles die after 100 frames, which is not what we want. That's from the lifespan here. Let's make sure this is at least 165. Okay, so now we have those particles kind of moving around, and you can mess with those all you want. Play around with those. I'll hit 2 on the keyboard just to look at what we got here. Now we have those particles coming up. Baby, it's looking pretty good. Let's take this merge, take the blend down. I just want to barely see those particles, just very subtle. Yeah, okay. And then this whole graphic, let's take this and just add a transform here. Let's start with this sized down a little bit, hit our keyframe, and at the end, we'll have this back at 1, like this. So now we have this coming up, lizard, monster. Yeah, baby. Yeah. Looks sick. Now our timing is a little bit off. I think these brush strokes could go back a little bit. Give those a little, see how this feels. Yes, there we go. I think we'll make this G come in a little bit faster. Just select this polygon, take these keyframes up a little bit. So we go, yes. All right, it looks pretty solid. So here's our finished graphic. Yes. Oh, looks so sweet. We made this all in Fusion, a free tool. Can you believe that? This was a fun project. I'm so excited to share this with you guys. Hey, if you want more kind of in-depth stuff like this, let me know in the comments. What movie titles do you want to recreate in Fusion? Let me know. And of course, make sure to check out that 9 nodes workshop. It's totally free. It's my gift to you. Here it is right here. And also check out this video here, which is going to be good for you. Hey, you look nice today. I don't actually know what you look like, but I assume you probably do. Just sitting there with your hair all messed up and your PJs. That's how I look. I'm not even wearing pants now. I am. Sadly, I'm wearing pants.